All right, so a while ago, we were sent a screener for The Man in the White Van, and that screener was being very difficult. And I just kind of forgot about it, to be honest, because I was just like, could not play it. I don't know what was wrong with that one. And then I was sent a screener again for it today after I told them, and they finally were like, "Oh, here's a new one,"
Yeah.
and was having the same issues, but finally figured it out. Had to go through some stuff, but we finally got to watch The Man in the White Van, which is currently playing in select theaters. When this will be on VOD or whatnot, I would assume probably pretty soon. I can't imagine that it'll take too long for this to get on VOD. So I would look for it pretty quick here.
Mm.
So now this is based on a true story. Now, how closely this resembles the true story, I was trying to look into the killer here, Billy Mansfield Jr.
Yeah.
I was starting to watch some video on him, uh, and I only got so far into it, and it was like 45 minutes long, and we just ran out of time before I could watch the thing to see if this actually is even semi similar.
Mm.
So I don't know. I don't know if this has any actual relation to the actual story or not, or if this is just like loosely based on, like
Mm.
they do with a lot of these movies. This is set in the 70s, and we follow our main protagonist here named Annie. Annie, right?
Yes.
Yes, Annie.
Yeah, Annie.
And
It's like, wait.
she's a small town girl in Florida, and she just likes to ride her horse and
Kind
be
of a
her tomboy
tomboy. Yeah.
self. And her family, her dad and her mom, played by Sean Astin,
Mm.
as well as Ali Larter. uh, you know the mom is much more of a traditional gal,
Yeah.
and she wants her daughter to be proper, and she wants her to be more ladylike, and of course she doesn't want to be. So there's some fighting about that, and she also has a uh, bad relationship with her sister, played by Breck Basinger, no relation to Kim, who I know from Stargirl and my kids'
Mm.
show Bella and the Bulldogs. But she and her have that kind of sibling rivalry that you're used to seeing with the tomboy versus like the
Girly girl.
yes.
Yeah.
And our Annie here is being stalked by a man in a white van, as
Yes.
the title would suggest. Uh, this is definitely more on the thriller side of things, a
Yeah.
true crime kind of thing. It was giving us vibes, because it is in the 70s, of The Woman of the Hour,
Hmm.
Anna Kendrick film on Netflix. It definitely had similarities to that film. I think where this film succeeds, and also I would like to point out that the main girl in this, Madison Wolfe, who plays Annie, is actually, Kaylee might be like, oh, but she's the main girl, the main kid from The Conjuring 2, who gets possessed,
Mm.
and is,
Okay.
yeah. So in case anyone is looking at her, it is like,
Hmm.
she looks semi familiar to me.
Okay.
That's where you know her from.
Yeah.
I think where this film succeeds is in its characters. Like, I
Mm.
did really like Annie. I thought she was a very relatable, like 15-year-old small town Florida girl
Yeah.
who is, combating with her family to just kind of like be herself, and she likes a boy at school, and it's very tropey. I don't think there's anything in this film that is even slightly unique. Like, it's all the kind of archetypes that you're used to. Sean Astin's kind of the dad who's on the road a lot,
Mm.
and when he comes home, he loves his daughters, but he's kind of like, um bows to his wife,
Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
really like wearing the pants in the family. And Ali Larter, his mom character, is very like proper woman, like, I'm gonna rule with an iron fist, but sometimes can be kind of cool. And the sister is getting into fights with one another, and then there's a little brother who plays somewhat of a role, but ultimately kind of disappears from the film. So I don't know. Overall, I think they do well with the characterizations,
Yeah.
and the '70s feel is fine. It's good.
I think that yeah, I really liked the costuming. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that like the general like aesthetic and vibe of the film feels pretty 70s. Not necessarily the way it's filmed or anything, but just like the house that they live in and the cars and all that
Yeah,
stuff. I felt like that was really 70s vibe, but a lot
yeah.
of the kids don't look like they're from the 70s. Like we
No,
just always notice nowadays when we watch films that are made now but set in a past time, like it's so obvious that it isn't like an authentic, like that you're not looking at people from that time period, because people nowadays just have a really specific look to their faces, that like it seems that no amount of hair and makeup and costuming can like disguise really, which is fine. That's not necessarily a knock or anything. It's
no.
more just like an observation. But I agree with you though. I think that the relationships and the characterizations of people are definitely like the highlight of the film. I did find it to be thrilling, but uh there's like the man in the white van is very much shrouded in like darkness, kind of literally and figuratively. And I think that that's intentional because this is supposed to be more of a focus on
The
the
character.
victims,
Yeah.
and I do appreciate that. But there's definitely like a morbid part of me that's like, I also want to know about this, like villain and like why he's doing this, and that's not this film, so that's not again, that's not a knock on the film or anything. It's just kind of a feeling that I had while watching it. um
I think, yeah, there's an attempt to not try to glorify the killer here, right?
Definitely.
Or humanize him.
Yes.
Like he's a monster.
Yeah.
And from the very little I got to see of him in that video I watched, he is a monster.
Yeah.
And I don't really need to know him all that much. Like, would it be fascinating to know him? Sure. Like the Dahmer uh, Netflix series, really getting into the mind of somebody like that. I get it. Like I get the people who want to know, and I get the people who are like, that feels wrong.
Yes, I can see both
Um
sides as well.
I've always struggled with both sides of it.
Mm-hmm.
The fascination with the macabre. I mean, obviously as horror fans, we have
Sure.
that, but I've always been way more interested in fictionalized violence.
Yeah.
I've never really been that interested in true crime. It's just
Mm.
never really appealed to me. I actually find it to be fairly icky.
Very, yeah,
And I
very
don't
icky.
like, I just, I don't know. It doesn't fascinate me like it fascinates other people. It
Yeah.
more just upsets me and confuses me, and is like, I genuinely don't understand what draws anyone to these kinds of
Well,
acts, which is,
yeah.
of course, I'm not a fucking psychopath.
Yeah,
But
I mean the people that are interested in that, like there is, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's definitely like sickos out there that are like glorifying the killers and like are into it, but I think like the majority of people that are into true crime and like enjoy watching that type of content, it's not because they like the content,
I get
in
it.
a sense, but it's like a, um like trying to learn why that happens
Sure.
and how it happens and like how that plays out. But
It's
yeah.
fascinating. I get it. And anyway, back to the film. I just think, yeah, that was an obvious choice by the
Yes.
director to just really focus on the people who were victims of this guy, whether they lived or they died, because the film does jump around in time a bit to give us a sense of what he's capable of. I think
Right.
that is probably the weakest aspect of the film, because it all just feels so random and detached.
Yeah, and I sort of think that's intentional, but that's also what reminds us of Woman of the Hour,
Hmm.
which that film actually does that aspect better,
Oh, way better.
because you spend a bit more time with the other victims, and with this one, it is so quick and brief, and yeah, I do think that that might be intentional to show like how random and just like, as you said, detached he was from things. I do wonder also if like this guy is the like genesis of that, like the the
The
creepy
white
white
panel van.
van. Yeah, I don't know if that's the first time that that was like
What
associated with a killer or like a creep.
do we even know he was in a van? Right? Like this is
I
what
mean,
I'm
I
saying. Like, do
assume they
we
would.
know like if any of this has happened? I was trying to get any info on this before we started the review, and I don't know.
I
So
feel like I should know about this person because I grew up in Florida, not in the 70s, obviously, but I don't know.
no, I don't know who this
So,
is either.
yeah.
And this film also does something that's pretty abnormal for these types of films is we don't even really, it says based on a true story at the beginning, but it does not end with like text
Yeah.
telling us who he
Or like
was,
what
what he
happens.
did,
Yeah.
what happened to him. Like it just kind of leaves off like a standard like thriller horror movie,
Mhm.
which I was pretty surprised by. I guess if people want to look into it, you don't get his name, you don't get anything in the movie, so it could just be anybody, it could just be anything. And if it didn't say based on a true story at the beginning, I would never think anything of it to look into this to see if it was. The movie is rated PG
Mm.
13, and it feels
Yeah.
it's very tame. This is something I would have no problem showing my kids. I don't think they'd be interested in all that much. Overall, I thought it was a fine movie.
Mhm.
Like it's watchable, and it's mostly because of our main characters, like
Yeah, their performances and
our girls.
their chemistry.
They yeah, I like them.
Yeah.
I don't love the characters. I don't love anything going on in here, but I like them enough to have got me through the movie, and I was rooting for Annie and ultimately everyone who comes across this maniac. But I don't know. I definitely didn't feel the thriller aspect of it being accomplished the way that I think that it meant to be. I thought
Mm.
that that was a weaker element. And that's probably because it was PG 13 and because it was trying to shroud itself in a little too much darkness.
Mm. Yeah.
Which, as you said, I think that's an attempt to not glorify
Yeah.
anything. But it's like, it also doesn't do it justice to portray horrendous, awful events like this and to not illustrate how deplorable it is. Like when we kind of like whitewash things like this and we try to put like a little bit of like a sugar coating on it, it takes away from how horrendous it actually was. So I feel like with stuff like this, it's either you do it or you don't. Like you
Yeah.
go in and you show how horrible it is, or you just, because if you're someone that's like, well, I don't want to glorify the violence and the murder, it's like, I mean, that's the story you chose to tell. I mean, you can't
Mm.
take Ted Bundy and make a fucking PG-13 movie out of it. That doesn't work because Ted Bundy's actions are not PG-13 by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
And while you don't need to like do something so visceral that you're gonna vomit, I think I think it takes something away when you try to uh dilute the carnage or the violence that these kinds of people are responsible for.
Mm.
That's my
It's a
own
good
take
point.
on it.
Yeah.
When I watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something, that's not gratuitous at all, right? Like that they were going for a PG rating in that movie back in
Yeah.
the day. But man, does it drive the point home that these are horrible, horrible acts.
Yeah.
That really feels like a grimy, dirty experience that you're like, you feel like this grindhouse feel of like,
Yeah.
holy fuck, dude, the weight of that movie is so intense.
Yeah, yeah. I guess for me, the other thing would be I think it's completely reasonable to make a film where you're not focused on the killer as much as you are on the victims and the people that like either survive or didn't. But I personally also think that um like making like the way that he's filmed in this is like a monster, like a boogeyman.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's like a it can be a dangerous perspective to take towards people like this because at the end of the day, even though they're evil and monsters, they are still people. And I think that's important to remember, not in like an empathetic, like we need to care about them, but like in a that kind of violence and the horribleness is kind of like anybody's capable of it, you know, under the right circumstances and with the right like brain chemistry. And that's what's scary about it to me. um I don't know. But I think that this, because it's PG-13, I also think that like portrayal works in a way, because it does, especially because like the people that we're following, especially like our main girl, like she's 15, and there is that like childlike, like you wouldn't really understand what was happening, so like you would be painting it like this is like a literal monster
Sure.
that's after me. So I also think that it can work in this context.
Yeah,
So
I think it's a decent thriller for like teenagers.
yeah,
I think that that would be the
this is
target
like the kind of
audience
movie
here,
that you could show your daughters or
to make them
children
afraid
to
of
be like,
people.
watch out for the white van.
Yeah.
But and that sucks. But it's kind of true.
I drive a white van.
Yeah, but not like this kind of white van. So anyway.
Hmm. All right. Well, it is currently in theaters, and I'm sure will be streaming soon. So let us know if you watch it. We'll see you in the comments. Adios.